Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should explain that I am the acting ranking member until the gentlelady from Florida deals with some issues. And those of you on the committee know that I've been here for 29 years. I've been chair of ranking member of a variety of different subcommittees, and I look forward to filling in this role. As to this hearing, we can start with a map of Judea and Samaria, and we will see that during most of our history, the Jewish people were an inland people. Yes, indeed, Hebron was part of the kingdom of Judea, but Tel Aviv wasn't, except when Israel or Judea reached its maximum extent, as it did at various times in its history. If we turn to any nationality and say you define your borders based on the maximum you ever controlled in history, then Mongolia would control half of the world, the Greeks would control Anatolia, the Germans would be restored to East Prussia, and the Chumash would own my condo in the San Fernando Valley. The fact of the matter is that modern Zionism focused more on the coastal plain than the ancient Israelites or the ancient kingdom of Judea, that the borders in 2025 should be drafted based on where people live now. Otherwise, you can call Israel a colonial settler state. Now that ignores the Jewish tie to the land, albeit slightly different borders of ancient times, but it also ignores the fact that every group of human beings is a group of colonial settlers. That before there were Chumash in the San Fernando Valley, I'm sure there were other tribes. That before there were the Turks in Anatolia, there were the Greeks. That before there were the Poles in northern Poland, there were the Germans. And before there were the Arabs in Morocco and Egypt, these lands spoke Latin and Berber and Egyptian and Greek, and one of the greatest imperialist enterprises in the history of the world was the Arab Empire and the first and the second caliphates. So the question, it is interesting to study history. I spent a lot of time doing it, but history should not be guiding us. We shouldn't, as to resolving modern problems. The slogan "from the river to the sea" is an ugly slogan, whether it is in the mouths of those who would expel or kill every Jew living west of the Jordan River, or whether it is in the hands of those who would permanently disenfranchise and in a few cases, or a few extremist politicians, expel the Arabs living in that same area. Now, the Palestinians have never lost an opportunity to lose their state. If we can put up the second chart, in 1947, the Jews of Israel accepted this 1947 map. As you can see, the majority of the populated areas are in the hands of the Arabs who now call themselves Arab Palestinians. So then we see the 1966 borders. We also don't have a map of it, but we see the Palestinian state that was offered by President Clinton with the approval of Israel in his last weeks in office. Again and again, to the amazement of the world, Palestinian leaders representing less military power demand total control of all the land. It is hard to recognize how unreasonable their bargaining position is, because we're used to the side that has the less military power accepting the more reasonable bargaining position. So I look forward to learning some history here, Mr. Chairman, but I am not going to focus my beliefs on how we should design peace in the Middle East on a discussion of whether the Samaritans were Jews or whether they're a separate group. And I yield back. Thank you. Mr. Klein, you point out that some of the greatest Jews in history lived in the West Bank, near Hebron, and elsewhere. But I would, it's my time, Mr. Klein. I would point out that some of the greatest Greeks in history lived in Western Anatolia and in Alexandria, a city founded by perhaps the greatest Greek of all, Alexander. Some of the greatest Greek temples to their false gods were built in Alexandria and in Anatolia. This does not mean that I support Greek annexation of northern Egypt or western Turkey. Our first witness, Eugene, you go through a list of places where you look at the previous borders. I'd point out that the U.S. rejects that when it comes to Kosovo, which of course was part of Serbia in the Yugoslav Federation. But I think we will find a time when Palestinian or Arab nationalists demand annexation and Israel rejects it. And I'll tell you why. You go back to your Ukraine example, you say, okay, Crimea, very much part of Ukraine. It was inhabited mostly by Russian speakers, a lot of Tatars. During the decades in which Kyiv controlled Crimea, were the Russian speakers disenfranchised or given the full franchise? Yes or no? It's a very simple question.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
They were allowed to vote in Ukrainian elections, of course.
Right. And could you imagine what would happen in the Knesset if everyone living on the West Bank and Gaza were able to vote? I think that would be a civil war in Israel. So annexation without enfranchisement is not something that the United States has ever supported. But I'll point out that I think Donald Trump was very clear when he said in September, I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. I will not allow it. It's not going to happen. And while some have argued that you don't need to annex the West Bank because it's already part of Israel, clearly that's not what President Trump had in mind. I've got a question for Mr. Klein that you're sitting next to the gentleman from the Heritage Foundation. Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts said, conservatives should not be canceling Nick Fuentes, and he excoriated those who called out Tucker Carlson as a venomous coalition of the globalist class. I believe you have called out Tucker Carlson for platforming a man who says Hitler was very effing cool. Are you part of a venomous coalition of the global class when you call for the denunciation of Mr. Fuentes?
Yes, Mike Huckabee's part of the venomous coalition, President Trump, Mark Levin. This was an outrageous statement. Obviously, when Tucker Carlson not only platforms a vicious Jew hater and denier of the Holocaust who praises Stalin and Hitler without repudiating him at that interview, had he had him there as an interview and condemned him for virtually everything he said, that would be one thing. But to be nodding his head and letting him go on and on with his outrageous statement, that was the crime.
I'll now shift to the gentleman from the Heritage Foundation. How comfortable are you staying at the Heritage Foundation given this dispute about the man who thinks that Hitler is cool?
I don't think there's any dispute at Heritage about Nick Fuentes. I think the president of Heritage, Kevin Roberts, has subsequently very clearly denounced Nick Fuentes. And most importantly, our work to combat anti-Semitism has vastly expanded in the past couple years, certainly since I came aboard in the past year.
I'll go finally to Mr. Altman. Can you think of how Israel, that if Israel were to annex the West Bank, do you think the world would tolerate the decades and decades of disenfranchising those who live there? And when I say disenfranchising, they might be allowed to vote in local elections, but no franchise to vote for the national government.
When I think of examples of countries that have had large populations where people by nature of race, religion, ethnicity have been systematically disenfranchised, it's not ended well. Whether it's the French presence in Algeria, southern Rhodesia, on and on and on, and as we currently see with the Chinese occupation of Tibet, it creates and also with the Uyghurs in Western China, it creates a sense of injustice.